Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. In this video, we're going to take a look at naming and writing formulas for molecular compounds. Remember, molecular compounds are formed through covalent bonds, and covalent bonds are the result of sharing electrons. That's different than ionic compounds. Ionic compounds are the result of transfer of electrons. Transferring those electrons creates ions. We do not have that here because atoms are sharing electrons. Since the electrons are shared, there's no formal charge. We're not making any ions here. Depending on the elements, there could be partial charges. Really, the only compound we're going to have to worry about in terms of partial charges is water, and we'll cover that in its separate unit. So, molecular compounds. These are formed when two or more nonmetals bond together. A lot of times these compounds have a large number of atoms. Because there can be a lot of atoms in a molecular compound, our naming rules take into account how many atoms of each element are present. The way we keep track of all the atoms that are present for each element is by using prefixes. We want to use prefixes to describe the number of atoms of each element in the compound. Okay, so if there's one atom in the compound, the prefix will be mono. If there's two atoms, the prefix will be di. If there's three atoms, tri, and so on and so forth. Okay, these prefixes, you are going to need to know these. All right, so if you got to memorize them, you got to memorize them. All right, in addition to using prefixes, just like ionic compounds, we're going to change the ending of the second element to "-ide". So here are some examples. If you're given the compound formula CO2, using the naming rules, you want to count the number of atoms of each element. The first element in this compound is carbon. How many carbons are there? There's one. The prefix for one is mono, but remember, we do not use mono for the first element in the compound. All right, so back to CO2. Again, we got one carbon. Prefix for one is mono. We're not going to use it, so our name is going to start with just carbon. The second element is oxygen. How many oxygens are there? 2. The prefix for 2 is di. So this compound is carbon dioxide. Right? Changing the ending to "-ide" and using the prefixes. All right, if you're given the name, you need to be able to write the formula. So here we have disulfur. What does that mean? The prefix di means 2. Means we have 2 sulfurs. The second element is heptoxide. Remember, the prefix hept or hepta is for 7. Means we have 7 oxygens, and we're going to change the ending to "-ide". Disulfur heptoxide is S2O7. P4Cl9, first element is phosphorus. How many are there? 4. Prefix for 4 is tetra. So this compound starts with tetraphosphorus. The second element is chlorine. How many chlorines are there? 9. The prefix for 9 is nona. So the second element here is nona chloride, making our name tetraphosphorus nona chloride. All right, and then the final example here, selenium hexafluoride. Notice there is no prefix here on selenium, meaning how many do we have? Just 1, all right? We didn't use the mono prefix on selenium because it was the first element. So we have 1 selenium, and then we have hexa, which is the prefix for 7, fluor, meaning fluorine, changing the ending to "ide" to complete our compound. Selenium hexafluoride is SeF7. So at this point, that's it for naming and formulating for molecular compounds. You can go practice now. The rest of these notes are going to be identifying types of compounds, because so far we've studied naming and formula writing separately, right? We focused on ionic separately, and then we focused on molecular separately. In the future, I'm going to be giving you a mix of ionic and molecular compounds. In order to apply the naming rules, first you must identify the type of compound. It's pretty simple to do this. You just need to ask yourself a couple questions. To determine the type of any compound, follow these steps. If the compound is formed with a metal and a nonmetal, the compound is ionic. If the compound has a polyatomic ion present, meaning there are more than 2 elements in your compound, the compound is ionic. Any other compounds in this class are considered molecular. All right, so if you're staring at an unknown compound and you're not sure what type of compound it is, ask yourself, is this a metal and a nonmetal? If the answer is yes, the compound is ionic. If the answer is no, check and see if you have a polyatomic ion. If the answer to both 1 and 2 is no, you don't have a metal and a nonmetal, you don't have more than 2 elements, then your compound has to be molecular. All right, once your compound is identified, you can follow the naming rules for that type of compound. If you need more help with this, I recommend using the flowchart that I have posted on Google Classroom. If you got any questions, let me know. Best of luck.